Hello and welcome to another edition of the Moving People podcast with me, Pierre Fitter. I head the hub for BCW India in my day job, taking care of digital, creative content, and analytics services for our clients. In my free time, I tend to moonlight as the host of this podcast where we talk with marketing and communications professionals about all things marketing and communications. On today's episode, we have Amit Patel, who is a passionate marketer and leads many great creative marketing campaigns for one of our clients, Cipla. I'll let Amit do more of his own introduction. But Amit, thank you so much for making time for the podcast and joining us today.
Thank you so much, Pierre. It's my pleasure to be here and having a discussion with you. Before we begin, I would just like to give a small disclaimer because I work in pharmaceutical industry, which is highly compliant in nature. So all the views that I am going to express during the podcast are my own. That does not reflect the views of my organization.
We're very, very compliant as a listed organization ourselves. So I'm glad you said that at the start, Amit. Why don't we actually start with your journey into your role today? Tell us about how you got to where you are and what you do.
Absolutely. So I think I started my journey way back in college. So I studied advertising. I am majors into advertising way back in 2004, I believe. And from that point onwards, very early on, I latched onto this notion of storytelling. And I think as human beings, as species, what separate us from other animals, I would say, is our ability to tell stories, which is throughout the civilization, we have progressed in that way, right? So that knack of storytelling led me through various distribution channels like your social media, your digital marketing, and various other things that we do out. So I started exploring those things. After my graduation, I did not pursue any MBA degree or anything like that, which traditionally people in India generally have a habit of doing. So I kind of am the black sheep on that front where I started gathering hands-on experience. So I had my own venture for about 4 years before moving to Dubai. In Dubai, I went into organizations like Worldwide Fashion, which was into e-commerce. Then I moved into VLCC, which is into service industry, or as I call it lovingly, entertainment industry. They're on into FMCG, and right now I'm into pharmaceuticals. So I think it's a very comprehensive journey that I have had. And in every organization that I was a part of, I led to one revolution, or at least one of the revolutions that happened inside the company. And because the times were such, this revolution can be attributed to digital. So at VLCC, at Dabur, and right now at Cipla, where I'm into consumer marketing specifically. And it's very hard to digest this for certain pharmaceutical companies because pharmaceutical companies operate in RX space, right?
Yeah.
Then there are OTC spaces. So OTC is as good as FMCG, I would say, where you have much more liberty. But in pharma, in course prescription space, I believe Cipla might be one of those few companies who are doing campaigns like this. This truly takes a lot of vision, I would say, from the management of Cipla to embark on a journey like this. And we have been constantly doing it since last 5 years, which we'll of course discuss down the line. An eye opener, and I would say every time I talk about these campaigns, I get goosebumps. And I'm sure it has impacted lives of crores and crores of people. And I truly enjoy doing that. So as I would say, a humble marketeer and a good storyteller is something that describes me best and the journey that I have had.
I have to say, the Beruk Zindagi campaign, as someone who suffered from childhood asthma, really struck very close to the heart. We will talk about that, and we have one of those questions coming up. But what I picked up on, Amit, is you've done so many different industries, and now, as you mentioned, you're in a very unique industry in that there is an OTC side where the rules are not as strict. But then there's the prescription side where you're incredibly highly regulated. So help us understand the marketing and comms landscape that you work in. What is unique to the challenges or the rules that you have to play with in your business?
See, I believe the rules are specifically made which are righteous in nature. It is not something that is being imposed. I believe
Yeah.
that it has got merit. So that's fair from the government side. And what I would like people to know and understand is in pharmaceutical world, currently we are living in something which I called as new normal, right? Now, this new normal is something where, a lot of pharmaceutical companies are opening up to create large scale therapy awareness campaigns. So traditional marketing at pharma usually happens with our doctors or with our chemists, with our stockists, right? And these are very similar programs which everyone does. So, for
Yeah.
example, here is a doctor. There might be 10 medical representatives waiting in your clinic, and having the same drug, which with different brand names.
Yeah.
So, just imagine a doctor who is having a limited window of 7 to 8 minutes, and he is exposed to 20 different names and 20 different things of the same molecule, right? And this
Yeah.
happens almost to 20 times a month So a doctor is exposed to 2,000, 3,000 brands. Where is the differentiation? Those are the only channels available traditionally and historically to pharmaceutical marketeers in this case. So that's why a lot of CMEs happen, which is continuing medical education to doctor fraternity. A lot of journals they support in this case. So that's a traditional side of things. Where we come in specifically, and we have led this industry through an example, is how a large scale therapy level campaign can actually shape the perception of a country towards a therapy area. So
Yeah.
as I call it, the campaigns that we do in Cipla at respiratory specifically is change the perception of India towards asthma and inhalation therapy
Mhm.
because of certain startling numbers that we have, right? And there might be other companies. For example, let's take an example of who is market leaders when it comes to in diabetes therapy area, right? But they have not done campaigns like this. They have perhaps trained a generation of doctors on how to use insulin. Cipla also does a similar campaigns like this, but on top of that, we do large scale consumer marketing campaign, which I think a lot of pharmaceutical companies are now trying to latch into this trend that goes beyond the pill. And I believe this new normal is all connected to one tightening of news when it comes to certain regulations, certain level of marketing that used to happen with doctors. So government is putting a magnifying glass to that.
And
Naturally,
rightfully so, as you said, there
rightfully
are
so.
practices we should crack down on. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why we see this pivot that companies have started taking steps towards either corporate branding exercises or they do therapy level exercises.
It's interesting you talk about therapy and breaking perceptions because I remember, going back to my childhood, that's my experience. When the doctor first prescribed Cipla inhaler, Aerocot, I must have been about 5 at the time. And I remember my mother discussing this word steroids. And this was the early 80s, mid 80s. And my mom said, but steroids, that's what bodybuilders use. Is it safe for my kid? And, so there was that misconception. So tell us about how you're using campaigns like Berog Zindagi to kind of break those perceptions. What convinced you that this is the right approach to take for a therapy area?
Absolutely. According to GINA, which is the guidelines for asthma, right? It's a body that governs asthma awareness across the world. They have a list of FAQs, which are
Yeah.
essentially 100 questions after the paper. And one question particularly caught my attention is, are ICS inhalers addictive, right?
Mhm.
And of all the FAQs that I have read, there were like big explanation. This one question had one line answer, one word answer, no full stop.
Yeah.
I think it can be summarized into one word, which is slightly technical to understand, but very important, is something what we call as the quinary prevention thing. So quinary prevention is, in a very layman's word, simplified word, I would say, is stopping misinformation. So
Yeah.
stopping misinformation, it is not just a task of a company. It is task of a society. It is task of doctors. It is task for everyone. We should stop the spread of misinformation, which is leading to a lot of problems. And when we say quinary prevention, I think the biggest challenge that any pharma company has when it comes to therapy level awareness is awareness. When
Yeah.
I say you know how to use an inhaler, but I will also, we got a startling fact that 70% of people who use inhalers, they use it wrong. And I have seen videos where people are putting inhalers in their nose. They are using it like perfumes. One gentleman, I believe he used to close the room and he used to spray the inhaler and then he used to walk in that, like using a perfume.
Okay.
There are
Yeah.
various uses which seems funny to us, but then see
Yeah.
what happens is then they start complaining that inhalers are not effective.
Hmm.
But you're using it wrong is also one something that you have to consider.
Adherence to protocols that we
Yeah.
talk about. Yeah.
So that's when the genesis of Berok Zindagi started 5 years ago because Cipla used to run a campaign called Breathe Free. So Breathe Free is a unique initiative, and I believe at this point of time it should be Asia's largest patient support program. So what a patient support program here is exactly that. Unfortunately, in India, patient to doctor ratio is very high, right?
Hmm.
So a doctor doesn't always get a chance to explain the right usage of that particular device.
Turning over patients every few
Yeah,
minutes.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's also something that is laid over into our minds, years and years ago. So you know how to take a pill, you take it, you drink water with it, that's it, you are done with it, right?
Yeah.
You know how to nebulize, you use steam, you just go in that, and that is also being used for generation. But in any therapy area, whenever there is a device that comes into play, that's where things haywire. As soon as I tell you that now you have to start using insulins, people are not afraid of insulins. People are afraid of
Yeah.
needles, right? And similarly, when I was doing research with Nielsen, I went and I immersed myself with various asthma users, non-users, and lapsers. I noticed this one thing, that what is addiction? And we
Mm.
somehow missed on quantifying addiction. We thought that people are afraid to use inhalers because they will get addicted to it. But the reason is quite the opposite. The reason, startling to me as well, because I knew it in my gut somewhere, but this is now documented, is Bollywood. The reason that people think inhalers are addictive is Bollywood, because every time an inhaler is shown on screen or in pop culture, somebody dies.
Overdose, quote unquote.
Not overdose. So
Okay.
if inhaler is not present with them, or if a villain gets the
Oh,
inhaler after
right.
the hero's mother dies,
Yeah.
or they might be in rush to get an inhaler, they will slip from the stairs and then they die. Or
Mm.
hero might just flick the inhaler away and the villain dies. So
Negative
somebody,
outcome with the.
if inhaler is not in my hand, I might die. That is
Mm.
the perception that people have, right? So with Berok Zinki, we started that. If you see in the first year, the idea was getting Priyanka Chopra on board because she is an asthmatic. And she came out and she told the entire country that I am an asthmatic and I live a Berok Zindagi. I live an unstoppable life. So even with asthma, I don't have to have any complications in my life. I live it with full freedom. Right? So that's where the campaign started. And as in how the campaign progressed, Pierre, we had set goals to the campaign. So first couple of years were creating awareness, and that too
Yeah.
specifically awareness about what asthma is and what an inhaler is.
Mm.
Second phase was acceptance. Now, acceptance is something that inhaler is the right treatment for asthma. That is what we, and that led to this sign, which is essentially an inhaler, and it also is a tick
Like a
sign,
check mark. Yeah.
yeah, like a check mark. And we have the slogan. So from third year onwards, we didn't call the campaign Berok Zindagi on it. It's an internal nomenclature. The campaign solely focuses on this tagline, asthma ke liye inhaler hai sahi.
Mm.
And we have songs and we have a lot of other things that went through with this campaign. What we did was we started taking Nielsen's brand track. So right now, inhaler awareness is at 100%,
Mhm.
but then inhaler adherence is only 5%.
Yeah. Your content marketing campaigns, that tells you that the strategy has been successful for you.
I think we are long way from success, given that the sufferers in this country are always going on a rise. It's not, the number is not going to go down given the pollution and everything that contributes to that. So there are new and new people that come into, and where we sit into the funnel, Pierre, is at the very top. So that's where
Yeah.
we are. So we have campaigns like Berok Zingi and Toughies at the very top. Then middle of the funnel we have devices and diagnostics. Bottom of the funnel we have Breathe Free as a patient support program to ensure that patients come in, they get diagnosed well, and they get treated well. So when we say campaigns like Berok Zingi has contributed, is that we try to maintain a brand track. Every year we initially used to run the campaign throughout the country. Then we decided that carpet bombing is not the right way to go. So we selected few cities where the prevalence of asthma is highest and the
Okay.
usage of inhaler is lowest. Right. So we focused on these kind of cities, and I believe in our radar we have around 70 odd cities across India where we do these campaigns, and specifically during the core months, which is rainy season and winter season in India. We do a very targeted cohort based campaign into these particular city set. And then towards the end of the year there is a measurement where we take a sample size and we try to measure the response of people, what was last year compared to this year, and what is the delta that we have. It is very hard to create a justification when it comes to sales and direct correlation to sales. However, our goal is to focus more towards the awareness side of things, or towards adherence side of it, or acceptance side of things, than focusing on sales.
That actually gets me to another question about content marketing campaigns, and particularly in the prescription space, because
Yeah.
you can't, of course, promote a specific product or drug. You're effectively going for a category building
Yeah, therapy
initiative
leverage.
in a sense. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about what brand marketers need to consider when they're looking at content marketing versus other marketing strategies that might be on the table.
I think the most important fact to understand is not because why any other company is doing this, but what is right for me. Like, for example, Cipla enjoys a dominant share when it comes to respiratory because
Yeah.
we brought inhalation therapy into India 60 years ago, and we have consistently been leaders into that, right? And suddenly, if you have like a 5%, 10% market share and you want to do campaigns like Berok Zindagi, trust me, please do not embark on such a journey. It is
Hmm.
bound to be a failure. Because if you start doing that, of course, the benefit is going to go to the dominant player,
Yeah.
and rest three nailers are further. So if you are in the other category, there is no sense for you to embark on a campaign like this. Perhaps you might want to build a good equity with doctors first. So that would be, I would say, the number one advice for any, because these kind of campaigns really excite you. But then there has to be a very strong motivation and vision from the management on why I want to do this. Not just because everyone is jumping into the bandwagon, I also go there. Right?
Yeah.
We did for a specific cause that the onus to develop the market comes with the market leader. It is not with the challenger brand. So at Cipla, we took this responsibility seriously that we have the responsibility of lungs of India. And if we want to eradicate stigmas and myths connected to a simple disease like asthma, it is simple because India enjoys an abnormal death ratio when it comes to asthma. Considering a country in neighboring countries as well, where infrastructure might not be so good, even in those scenarios, why is India suffering in this
Yeah.
particular therapy area? So
From
that's
an entirely preventable death.
yeah, it is manageable. Asthma is a
Yeah.
chronic disease, it won't go away.
Yeah.
And that is also something that people have to understand. Like if
Exactly.
you have diabetes and suddenly you see a lot of these companies these days started talking about diabetes reversal, that is actually wrong. This is misleading ads. Condition like diabetes cannot be reversed unless a revolutionary drug or a therapy comes along, right? So
True.
similar is the case with asthma that yes, now you have to live with that, but you can manage it much more better. And that's where
Absolutely.
PSP started creating one more campaign, which is called Toughies, which is based on another insight that if we diagnose your asthma during first 5 or 6 years of your age, it is much more manageable towards your later years. So these are
Yeah.
ground insights that doctors and talking to chemists, talking to consumers, talking to patients that we get, and we try to action on that.
Tell us a little bit about it, because how did you arrive on this insight that starting early gets better outcomes later in life? Yeah.
Absolutely. There are a lot of studies that were done. And at Respiratory, we were trying to focus more on Berog Zindagi. But pediatricians across the country, they shared these insights with us. And those were startling numbers that 8% of kids in India already suffering from asthma. And there is no awareness, absolutely zero awareness in pediatric respiratory space. And that kind of caught my attention because in South Africa, we were doing a campaign which is called Bronchi Boosters. So this Bronchi Boosters in South Africa is again done by Cipla South Africa team, which was targeted towards pediatric asthma. And that's where my CEO got in touch that why can't we cross-pollinate this? Can we create Bronchi Boosters for India? Right? And I said instead of replicating it for India, I think we would like to give it a desi tadka and let's create something, a new property which is meant for India. So that's where Toughies been born. And the single lying underlying insight is first and foremost to help kids of India breathe free. And kids who are suffering from respiratory disease, specifically asthma, are generally perceived weaker in the society. So your parents will not allow you to play in the garden. They won't allow you to go with the hair. There are restrictions on you because you have asthma. I'm sure if you have faced it in your childhood, you must recall some of those
I,
things.
I was just going to say, 1 year after starting Aerocourt,
Hmm.
I was on the school swimming team, football team, hockey team,
Oh
and
wow.
before that, I couldn't run 50 meters. I would just collapse with, yeah, just gasping for breath. So yeah, but
I
I
think
agree wholeheartedly as a
feature
patient. Yeah.
your story perhaps in this year's Bureau Zindagi because it's based on real people, real stories, and we need
Yeah,
testimonies like this so that people can believe.
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
just moving forward with the Toughies initiative, I'm wearing orange T-shirt that is the color of Toughies. We want to attract attention towards kids, but kids are not going to pay attention on how to use inhalers. They don't have an agenda, and it's more for parents. So what we decided is to create 3D characters, Gullu, Vicky, Minnie. These are fictional characters. It's a detective gang living in a fictional city and they solve mysteries. So we created
Hmm.
comic. That comic book is does have good morals at the end of the day. It has integration about awareness. Kids can also realize and parents can also read out to them. And it has got a beautiful contest that we are going to build. That if your kid is a toughie, please share that information with us. He can be a part of new comic books. He can be a part of animated series, etc. So we started Toughies. I think Sonali Bendre launched it. Her kid is asthmatic, so right fit right there. A mother saying out to the world that why Toughies is important. And this campaign is kind of co-created with Pediatricians of India. They are helping us write the comic books. They have an
Yeah.
active say in what we do. So we decided that we will not let Toughies go berserk on the internet from day one. Right. So Toughies is a very, very nuanced campaign, which is, I think, 6 to 7 months right now. We are going grassroots level first. So Toughies goes into school, which is known as Toughies Ki School Yatra. In the first year, we did around 550 odd school, reach out to 2 lakh kids. We have ambition to reach 10 lakh kids down the line. So it is again connected to schools. Then we went inside doctors' clinics where instead of, again, a small insight where if parents are bringing a kid to a pediatrician, usually that kid is playing with mobile phone and parents are listening to what the pediatrician is saying. If pediatrician gives them a comic book right and then and there, they leave the phones and they start
Get
reading.
into it.
It's again a very important thing that start this habit of reading instead of screen time. And screen time, you must have seen a lot of reports how it affects kids' brain at a younger age. So that is
Yeah.
again one of things. And then we give out a lot of things like pencils and coloring books and jigsaw puzzles, etc. to these kids, along with comic books, of course, so that they have a good affiliation with the characters. My
Yeah.
objective is
And
to
there's no
be
negative association with,
no, in fact, it is a
yeah,
positive thing that we are trying to
exactly.
say that even you have this condition, go and show it to a doctor. It is a very simple thing and highly manageable. And all the myths and stigmas that you have, it's largely in your brain. And you know what happens is that if a kid reads about something like this, they end up convincing others. Given the way my upbringing was, where if my parents are saying something, I have to listen to them, right? But kids these days are quite the opposite. I think it's a generational thing, I would say, where kids are also saying something and influencing their parents.
Yeah.
And we want to
Yeah.
create this property. So we want toughies to become chota beams down the line. So they can really be a virtual influencer and then start affecting us, then start giving out this message. So it's a highly, I would say, nuanced campaign which just got started. We also had Shankar Mahadevan on board. He created a beautiful, beautiful song. And
Yeah.
that was again, I think we got lucky because when we released the song at that point of time, Shankar won Grammy. And I think it was not timed that way, but coincidentally it happened.
But it,
And
yeah.
when we released the song on Instagram, it trended for 30 days straight. We got around 3,000. I was also surprised to see, my goodness, wow. So this movement has started taking off. And I'm sure
A
it will go
small
big.
amount of luck helps as well
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes.
true that.
Amit, we have time for one more question, and I do this with a lot of our clients who are in the marketing space. How do you take in information on a daily basis, right? So, what are you reading? What are you listening to? What handles do you follow that you think other marketers and communicators would benefit from?
I believe in one thing. See, you are never going to learn something as profoundly as when it is purely out of curiosity, right? So if you are curious about marketing, the entire internet is open. Like I don't have a specific book or a specific website I can recommend it to you, but plot in your interests, be it in technology, be it in marketing, and the resources are endless on the internet. Like I was recently, last I remember, I was just on podcast app and I started following this gentleman called Scott Galloway. I went through 4 or 5 episodes of Pivot, and then there was one mention of the book called Nudge in one of his podcasts. So I went and bought the book. I read it again, enriching. Then Nudge led me to one more book, which is called Cheetahs and Elephants by Saral Mukherjee. So you see, that's how I
Yeah.
go about myself. So there is no particular source. Like
Down
there's
the
just
rabbit
one
hole of
device.
your curiosity.
Every morning, I have a habit of going and reading theverge.com, which is
Yeah.
my premium news destination, my favorites, I would say. So I go there. That's one site I visit without fail, apart from Wordle for sure.
Yeah, they say the New York Times now survives as a gaming platform more than a news platform. So, yeah. I mean, it's been so fascinating talking to you. I think there's some wonderful lessons from the Beruk Zindagi and Toughies campaign. We're really glad that you could come on and share those with us on the Moving People podcast. Thank you so much for making time with us.
Thanks a lot, Pierre. It was indeed great to chat with you.
That was another episode of the Moving People podcast. We hope you enjoyed this one. I know I did. Thank you so much. And we will catch you next time.